Once upon a time, a girl named Holly moved to a town called HollyWould. She had many adventures, and soon she began to write about them on a Substack called HollyWould, because she would. Then, she wondered what her friends and acquaintances were up to and how they lived their lives in this strange land, so she started this very podcast in order to find out. And now, you can too. Welcome to HollyWould.
I just wanna get effed up and dance. This is our only chance. Happiness is fleeting. This feeling's way too good to last. Get effed up and dance. No future.
Welcome to HollyWould. I'm your host, Holly Solem. This is my show, and today I'm going to do my first ever solo episode, the HollyWould Confessionals. Here we are. And I'm going to go ahead and just say right up front, I'm going to give this episode a trigger warning. Because I am going to talk about a lot of sensitive subjects. The other day, I celebrated my 6-year sober birthday. And, I'm nervous. It's like scary to just do this by myself. Normally, I can put it all on someone else. Anyway, I celebrated my 6-year sober birthday, and I thought it would be a good time to do a solo episode to talk about that and to talk about my story with addiction and sobriety. And I really just, want people to feel inspired. I want people that feel hopeless, people that feel lost, people that are having problems with addiction, whether it's people, places, or things, problems with their family, maternal estrangement, all of it. This one's for you. Or parental estrangement. This one is for you and for those who love people that are struggling with addiction. So why don't I just start on the day that it all ended for me. The day of my rock bottom was February 22nd, 2018. I woke up in the morning in my own bed and my face hurt so bad, which was not abnormal because I was hungover always, every day for years. But this day, the pain was like excruciating. Like I was like, what, why, what happened? And I sat up and I looked down and my shirt had blood on it and I had no idea why. So I got up, I made my way into the bathroom and I looked into the mirror and I did not recognize the person I saw in the mirror. She had, blood on her face. Her nose was like crooked off to the side, like crusty, bloody scabs and bruises and a split lip and a cracked tooth. And obviously it was me, but it wasn't me, but it was me. And I really still had no idea what had happened. So I walked into my kitchen and I saw just wreckage, like bottles everywhere and ashtrays. And I looked out the window and made sure my car was there and not damaged. And it was fine. So I was like, okay, I didn't drive. This wasn't a car accident. But still, I couldn't remember. So I walked around the house. I walked into my studio. I was living in Nashville at the time. And I had like a room that was like my recording studio. And my piano bench was completely smashed up, like legs splayed out, Bambi on ice style. And I noticed the side of the bench matched the cuts on my face, like across my face. So I kind of put it together. I must have fallen face first onto the piano bench and broken it with my face. And I just sort of saw everything so clearly for the first time ever. And I looked around and I was really sad and really like disappointed in myself. And I was done. And it was the clearest moment of my whole entire life. I just knew, never again. This will never happen again. And so then I ran into the bathroom and projectile vomited. And so what happened after that is, I went to an AA meeting, sobbing, broken face, broken spirit. And my life had been spinning out of control for years before that. For a while, it seemed like things were going really well, and I was on a TV show, and I was like making money and getting songs in movies, and I was like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm partying and I'm working, and it's working. But, these things are not sustainable. And by the time I moved to Nashville, my life had begun to really like circle the drain. And my behavior was insane. I was insane. I was like drinking every single day, vodka in the morning, often. But let's go back. Like, how did it begin? How did I get there? How did things get so bad? I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and my father is in a band called the Rembrandts. So he, started having a lot of success when I was like 5 years old. They had a hit song called That's Just the Way It Is, Baby. He was on tour all the time. My mother was very, very young. She was like 19 when she had me. We often felt more like sisters. So, my dad was a rock star. My mom was a teenager. Like, I didn't have like a typical like parental structure. And when my parents split up when I was 15, at this point, my dad had a massive, huge hit with the Friends theme song. And our family sort of imploded around that time. It was really intense, like my father's sudden, like extreme fame, and just the schedule of what he had to do surrounding all of that was beyond. He was just like never around. And when he was like exhausted and drained and stressed out. My mother was so unhappy. And so again, it was like I felt a lot of just like I'm sort of on my own in the world from a very young age. My mother ended up leaving and moving to another state to remarry when I was 16. And my dad wasn't really in a place to take care of me. So suddenly I was on my own. And I'd always been very mature, very precocious, very good in school. I had modeled since I was a little kid. I think everyone thought, Holly will be fine. She can take care of herself. But the truth is, I was just a kid. And I went bonkers, like completely lost my mind, like started drinking all the time, partying all the time. I was hanging out with adults, never people my own age. And I was just like ready to be grown up. And I ended up dropping out of school because it was like, no one was around to drive me to school and no one was around to take care of me. And I ended up moving to Chicago. I was supposed to model in Chicago. And then I got dropped from my agency for never showing up at my go-sees. I was like completely irresponsible and feral at this point. And I just wanted to fucking party all the time. And I didn't want to feel the sadness of like my mother leaving or, what had happened to my family. I didn't want to think about it. I just was like, I'm having fun is what I thought. In Chicago, things got really, really, really bad. When I was 17, I was like going to different bars every night. I had a fake ID, and I was like picking up grown men and going home with them. I never wanted to be alone. I was terrified to be by myself. So I just, I thought it was like a fun game. Like, oh, I can like sleep with any man I want. These men were not like cool or hot. It was just like a random slew of just like, I don't know, needing attention or needing love or something that felt like it. And it was really scary. And my life was just spinning out of control. And, I had no money. It was a disaster. I was blacking out all the time. When I turned 18 years old, I sort of had a little moment of clarity. And I was like, I'm wasting my potential. I'm better than this. I have to get my shit together. I'm going to go back to Minnesota and try to pull my life together. I'd always been an artist. I'd been a writer. I'd been a songwriter. I was like, I want to start a band. I want to do things. I'm meant to be somebody. I'm not meant to be just like this, trashy, sad person, addict. I'd gotten into cocaine at this point and drugs, and it was dark. So I was 18. I moved back to Minneapolis, and I felt like old. I felt so weathered and tired and old and beat down, but I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I sort of picked myself up, and I got a job in a restaurant, and I put together a band, and I got myself a 37-year-old boyfriend who was a rock star because that was all I knew. And he also liked to drink and party and do drugs. But he was, in a band, and he was doing it, and he was sort of aspirational in that sense. So I kind of like kept myself on track, and people started coming to my shows, and things got sort of fun. This boyfriend, he like cheated on me all the time. I like saw him in the newspaper, not the newspaper, I'm not that old. I saw him in like an Us magazine with Winona Ryder holding hands when I was home in Minneapolis, and he was on tour. Just stuff like that all the time. So heartbreaking. Anyway, things seemed like they were going well, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get a record deal. Like, I'll probably move to LA. This is all happening for me. And then one night I was wrapping up my shift at the Irish pub where I worked, and I went outside to my car, and it was blizzard snowing. So I was like, turned the car on, was scraping snow off of the car, walking around the perimeter of it. And I went to get back into my car to drive to my boyfriend's house, and somebody just pushed me in the car and just started punching me in the face. And I didn't know what was happening. And suddenly they were driving away in my car with me like pinned down in the passenger seat. And I got kidnapped and taken for a good 10 hours. I was in that car. And when I finally escaped, like, at dawn, I got out, and it was blizzarding snow everywhere. And I just was never the same again. It completely changed me.
What happened within those 10 hours in the car?
It was like a fight for my life for 10 hours. Like, he told me he was going to kill me, and he kept like driving and then pulling over, and I would be like, oh my God, this is a second location. You learn in TV or at school or whatever, like the second location means you're dead. So I really, kind of had the thing where like my life did flash before my eyes, and I kept thinking like, oh my God, I'm only 19 and it's all going to end. I had just turned 20. But I forgot. In that moment, I kept thinking, I'm just 19 and I'm going to die. And
did he try hurting you?
He hurt me a lot. Yeah, he beat me up really badly. He sexually assaulted me. I fought so hard. I was like willing to kill him too. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he's going to kill me, but I will also kill him if I can. He was a lot bigger than me and a lot stronger than me. The whole time I didn't really understand why this was happening. I didn't know who he was. It just came out of nowhere. Your life is just, you're living, and then in an instant, everything is different. So after the kidnapping, I went to the hospital. I was completely beat up. My face was unrecognizable. And I had a really, really hard year after that, because not only was I so anxious and had such a hard time even just leaving the house, and I was very scared too. I didn't know who this person was. I didn't know if he was going to come back for me.
Did you report it to the police?
Oh yeah, the police came to the hospital, social workers, like it was a whole ordeal. It was like a procedural, it was like, what is that show with Mariska Hargitay?
I don't know.
It was like a true crime show. It was insane. Yeah, and people weren't like friendly. Everyone was like looking at me with suspicion, like I had somehow caused this, or they were like, what happened? And I kept trying to explain what had happened, and it was horrible. They ended up catching the guy. They had DNA evidence. They did a rape kit. So they do like all these tests on you, and they swab you from head to toe for DNA, and they got DNA. And so when they caught the guy, it was like they had the DNA. It was enough evidence to, put him away. I had to go to court.
Had he done it to other women?
Yeah. There were like, I think by the time we went to court, I think there were like 7 or 8 other women. And I was the only one that had DNA evidence. So I was the only one that could testify, and I was the only one they could charge him with the crime. So it was like, I wasn't doing this just for me. It was for all these women. But, even having this man in prison didn't really make me feel better. I still felt very like unstable and insecure and very afraid. And, I also felt very alone after that happened. And I had a therapist prescribe me some like anxiety medication, and I just took that all the time. And I drank bottle after bottle of wine, and I just didn't really want to exist anymore. I didn't feel supported from my family. I think, my dad was living in LA, and I kind of downplayed it to him because it's just like I just didn't want his reaction of like the freak out. This was, before like we were all online all the time. So it was easy for me to just sort of disappear. My mother also, no one handled it well. No one around me handled it well. Yeah, everybody sort of was afraid to talk to me about it, was afraid to look at me. My face was like, I had like bloody eyeballs. I mean, it was swollen face. Like I really was unrecognizable for a long time. So I got further into drugs and further into alcohol and wanting to disappear and not wanting to exist. And one morning I woke up, and next to the bed there was a pile of clothes that it smelled like burning. I woke up, I smelled burning, and I stood up and I noticed the pile of clothes had a hole in the center of it, and I had fallen asleep with a lit cigarette and it fell into the laundry. And I at first was like so mad. Like, why? Why am I alive? Like, why didn't this just take me out? I don't get it. Like, after all this, like, I shouldn't be here. And then I sort of got a perspective shift and went, oh, wait, I'm alive despite all of these crazy circumstances. I'm still alive. I'm supposed to do something. I'm supposed to do something big. And that's when I decided to move to LA. So it was just one little year after the kidnapping. And, you know, I didn't do anything. I went to like one therapy session. You know, I didn't have any money still. Like, I didn't have support. And I was still so young, and I just didn't have any coping skills. So I just was like this kid on my own still. So I decided to move to LA, and, you know, again, like, I'm going to get my shit together and I'm going to go be a star. And that's the solution, because if the whole world can see me, then maybe I'll be safe. Maybe I'll be loved. And if, you know, maybe the people that are coming to murder me won't be able to get to me so easily.
Did you think that maybe that was possible because you'd also see your dad with success and you saw him?
Definitely. I'd always thought I was going to be famous. Like, since I was a little kid, I was like, I'm a star. I'm a famous superstar. When my dad got really famous, I was jealous. I was like so excited for him, and it was so fun to watch it all happen, because when I was a little kid, my dad wasn't famous. He was like in a wedding band. And then like to see him like get his first hit and get on the radio, and then to just go into the stratospheric Friends universe, it was like amazing and exciting, and I wanted it too for me. So I get to LA. I, within a couple weeks, meet some like powerful people. I meet a famous director at a dinner party. He takes a liking to me. He's like, I'm going to put your song in a movie. I'm like, really? And of course, he also wanted to date me. So I kind of had to play a little game of like, you know, flirting with him. I just thought this was part of how it worked. And he did, though. He did put my song in a movie. And because of that, I suddenly had a lot of attention, because he was kind of like the hot director of the moment. And I signed with a big management company. And then the manager, one of the managers at the company, you know, started plying me with cocaine, plying me with drugs, taking me out, giving me alcohol. And then he ended up attacking me and basically telling me, if you don't become my girlfriend, like, I'm going to make this all go away. Like, you have to be with me, or I'm just going to ruin your career, ruin your reputation, and make the movie deal go away. And that's how it works. So he sort of became my boyfriend and my manager and my drug dealer. And I felt like I was being held hostage again. So what time is it? How much time do we have?
You're good. We got another basically 30.
Okay.
Well, let's call it 25.
All right. So anyway, thus begun my LA story, where I had success, and with it always came sort of like a situation with a man that I was beholden to. And that played out again and again and again in my whole career in music. It kept happening. And I, rode this fucking wave of like feast and famine, like getting a deal, getting a bunch of money, thinking I was on top of the world, having like a huge ego, like, oh, I made it, dancing on the tables at Grammy parties, and like having, why am I forgetting his name? What's the guy from, oh my God, I'm having a total blank. We're going to have to cut this.
That's okay. We can cut that or not. But I have a question while you're thinking about his name. Were you still just doing cocaine? Had drugs changed? Was it alcohol, cocaine, or was there other drugs involved?
Yes, I got into other drugs. So cocaine was my big favorite drug. I loved it. I just loved being awake. I've always loved being like hyper and awake. And I loved drinking too. I loved getting wasted and then like waking myself up. And, it was fun for about 2 seconds. And of course, it just doesn't last. But then I did get into other drugs. I got into heroin. I got into smoking heroin. I got into pills. I got into speed for a while. Like, it's like staying up and writing songs and taking speed, and it was so sad. I honestly didn't know any other way to live. I just thought, this is it. This is how we do it. This is how grown-ups do it. This is how rock stars live. I mean, it's so cute that I thought I was such a rock star.
Did you think you were ever going to die? A lot of people have like, oh, I won't make it till 27.
For sure. I really thought I was going to die young. And that was like my plan. Like I didn't ever want to grow up. I didn't ever think like being like an older person would be something I was into. I was like, nah, no, no, thank you. I'm good. I'm going to just be young forever. I didn't have a lot of respect for life, for my life at all. I had no respect for my life. And I just wanted to be free and have fun and do what I wanted to do. And, it wasn't that fun. It was hard. It was stressful. And I was always like scrambling to like fix all these problems. And my life was constantly falling apart. And I had a couple times in my 20s where, I had to get sober because my bandmates would be like, we're all going to quit unless you get sober. I would stop showing up for rehearsals and stuff. I mean, I was a mess. I was smoking heroin. I was driving downtown to Skid Row and buying heroin from like scary men that would get into my car, and I'd give them money and drive them around the block, and then they would like go into a building and they'd come back. And and this was after I'd been kidnapped. I'm like, what the hell was I doing? So, I got pregnant. I was on heroin. I had an abortion. I was a disaster. And I really had no idea how to do it any other way. So, it gets boring to just like continue to tell the story of what a fucking mess I was. You get the picture. It wasn't pretty. And it just went up and down and up and down. And, I would get sober. I got sober for like a year. I didn't want to be sober. I wasn't into it. I didn't like it. I was like feeling like I was missing out. And
were you attending meetings, or was it just sober, your version of sober of like?
I was going to meetings. I was trying, and life, of course, did get better. And I was in a cool band on a major label. And then I got a cool boyfriend and blah, blah, blah. And then I went to Ireland with him and I relapsed. And I totally downplayed it with him. I was like, oh, I'm just not drinking right now. Like, I wasn't honest about my addiction with him because I wasn't honest about it with myself. So, I got on a TV show and I was using again. And I really thought I'd figured out the magic combination because I had never made more money. I'd never had more success. And I had never been able to afford as many drugs as I could take. And I just, was buying 8 balls of cocaine. And
how old are you at this point now?
At this point, I was 30. And I thought, or I was 31. Yeah, 30, 31. I was like, this is great. I figured it out. Inside, I was deeply, deeply sad. And it was the same thing where I just felt like I don't want to be alone ever. I was like racing all the time. And I did become very like suicidal, where I'd wake up a lot and be like mad that I took such a crazy amount of drugs last night, such a combination. I shouldn't be here. People were dying, when I was in my 20s, like Heath Ledger, and people were having accidental overdoses. And I was taking the same combinations of drugs and alcohol and living. And I just kept living. I just couldn't believe it. So finally I moved to Tennessee, and really my life really spun out of control. It's like, could it get any worse? Yes, it could.
But why Tennessee? Like, why do you go from LA to Tennessee?
Because I wanted to be a real person, which is so weird. Like, I wanted to go be famous in Los Angeles, and then I realized, oh, I didn't quite make it. Like, I made it as far as I maybe will ever make it, because the show got canceled. It didn't like lead to a bunch of opportunities like I thought it would. And I think a lot of that is because I was a fucking mess and I was not reaching my potential. And I'm proud of the work and the songs that I wrote on Hand of God, but I feel like, if I had an opportunity like that today, I probably would be able to make a lot more out of it. I just sort of was like taking what I could get at the time. So once that got canceled, I thought, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble, because now I had my opportunity to get famous and it didn't work, and I don't know how to be a real person. I don't know how to like not be in front of a camera and be okay. Like I was having an existential crisis of like, I need to like be humbled and be real. And maybe I'll just go to Nashville and I can write songs for other people. So that was my big plan. I'd never even been to Nashville. I just packed up and moved there. And I was like, I have TV money. I'm fine. And I rented this house, and I was like, oh, it's so cheap here. This 3-bedroom house, and kind of like in a rural area on like 2 acres. And I just got to drinking. I just started just drinking all the time. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have anyone who loved me or cared about me or had my back or wanted to look out for me or wanted to check in on me. I was like left to my own devices. And all my friends were back in LA. My father hadn't moved to Nashville yet. So I was just kind of like alone. And I was like, okay, new plan. I'm going to drink myself to death. And during that time, I thought I had a lot of money coming in because there was like back end deals for the second season of Hand of God. And my lawyer had told me like, oh, once the soundtrack comes out, we'll get all this money, blah, blah, blah. When the soundtrack came out, he was like, no, we never did that deal. So suddenly I had no money coming in and a huge overhead and a huge IRS bill. And just, so that was like where it all started. I was like, oh my God, this is really bad. I'm really bad. I'm in like deep financial trouble now. And then I was just scrambling to try to like find something to fix it. And my career was dried up. Like nobody was calling me. Nobody wanted to work with me. Nobody in Nashville gave a fuck about who I was or that I'd, done anything in LA. They don't care about that. So I was like, okay, I'll find a man. I'll quickly find someone to marry me. And I was, I had like 3 boyfriends going at the same time. And all of them liked to drink and do drugs. And they were all feeding into my habit. And I was getting more and more scared and sad. And I was getting older. And I thought, this is it. I have to just end it. I don't want to be alive anymore. So the morning I woke up on February 22nd, 2018, I was 35, and all that I described, plus a million other things, were behind me. And for some reason, on that morning, it was the first morning that I was like, whoops, I do want to be alive. I do. I want to be alive. I'm going to choose life. I found out a few days later I had a head injury. I went to the hospital because I couldn't stop throwing up. I couldn't be in any light. I couldn't hear any sound. Like I just was projectile vomiting all the time. I was like, this is not a hangover. This is something more serious. So, I had a broken nose, a concussion, and something must have happened when I hit my head because I finally had clarity. And it was the best day of my life, like hands down. It was the scariest day of my life and the best. And from there, I had asked to get humbled and I had asked to learn how to be a real person. And boy, did I get it. Like everything. I lost my house. I got kicked out. I couldn't pay the rent. The IRS cleared out my bank account. Not a fucking penny did I have to my name. I could not have been more humbled. My face was broken again. My father, weirdly, had just moved to Tennessee, bought a house in Nashville, and then my grandma moved in with him because she was getting older, and I like showed up on his doorstep, basically like sobbing, like I need help. Can I come live here? So I ended up getting a job in a pizza restaurant, and boy, was that humbling. I was working with a bunch of teenagers, just like praying they didn't Google me. Why would they? Because they thought I was young too. They thought I was just like some kid like they were, but it's like, please don't let them find out I'm a 35-year-old grown woman with like a whole history of life behind me. It was embarrassing and it felt humiliating, but honestly, what a privilege it was to be able to like live with my family. Like how lucky was that my dad was even there to to help me. He didn't shame me. He didn't embarrass me. He didn't make me feel bad about myself. He just took me in, and it was it was so hard, but it was so good. And so, really, really the whole point of telling a story like this is the outcome. I started going to meetings. I went to meetings every day. I was just so desperate to get better, to have my head get better, to heal whatever it was that had caused me to be so suicidal and sad. I felt an immense amount of guilt, mostly for just like squandering the gift of life and my potential. And I really, really wanted to reach my potential. I really was like, I'm still here. There's a reason. I know I'm good at things. I know I'm talented. I know I have a story to tell. I wasn't ready to tell it for a long time. I had to work through a lot of shame and embarrassment. During that first year, I cut ties with my mother, which was, I can't even describe how painful that was. Our relationship was toxic, and she didn't want to meet me in the middle, and I took responsibility for my side of things, and I just felt like I couldn't, like I just kept getting blamed and blamed and blamed, like it was all my fault, when that's just not possible in a relationship. It takes two. But the most important thing I learned through all of this was forgiving myself for all my insane behavior, because I really didn't know better. And I really didn't have like the tools, or I just didn't know. It took me a long time to really understand how much I didn't know, and how much you can't know what you don't know. And in forgiving myself, I was able to forgive my mother, my father, my family, everybody really that I felt had wronged me in life. Because if I didn't know, they probably didn't know either. And
did you do therapy?
Yes, I got a grant from Music Cares, which is a wonderful organization that helps musicians and people that work in the music industry with, mental health and addiction. And I started going to EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I mean, give it a Google, because there's no way I can possibly explain it well, but it changed me. It helped me more than anything else. And once I was in EMDR and I started to feel better in your body, it moves trauma out of your body. So you work on like triggers, like an early traumatic memory, which could be triggering the way you behave and operate in the world today. And I really realized like the root of all my addiction and, detrimental behaviors was trauma, unprocessed trauma. And I think that's the root of most people's addiction. I think that's what we don't speak enough about in programs like AA. Like, I think the 12 steps are the most beautiful thing in the world. I've done them 3 times, but I needed to go deeper. And EMDR changed my life, for sure.
And what are you doing today?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, how much time do we have?
I would wrap it up, and then we'll do the outro.
Okay. So today is beautiful. I don't recognize my life. I don't recognize myself I have the best fucking life in the world. The story about moving in with my father and grandmother, I wrote an essay about it, and it came out in fucking Vogue magazine, or Vogue.com, because no one reads magazines anymore, but Vogue.com, like 2 days ago, which is insane. If somebody had told me during that time, like tapped me on the shoulder and been like, this part of your life is going to be in Vogue, I would have been like, no, please no. I don't want anyone to know about this. And that is just sort of the point of everything I do, is like the most humiliating, humbling moments of my life are the things that I am exposing now. And that is what is giving me a career and giving me success and making people relate to my stories and relate to what I'm talking about, because I'm not afraid to say everything that happened, everything I did. I mean, I'm no angel in these stories. I'm not trying to paint myself as, some sort of perfect person. But, the honesty and the vulnerability, I think, is what is resonating with people. Or
in your Substack?
It is, yeah. So I started writing a Substack. People started reading it. I decided to write a book, a memoir. And I signed with a lit agent in New York. And I'm writing. I'm doing a podcast. I have amazing friends. I have great relationships. I have wonderful relationships with my family, not my mother. We still don't speak, and it's hard, but it's okay. I can send her love, and I want the best for everybody. I have wonderful relationships with everyone else that in my family, and my friendships are beyond. Everything in my life is beyond. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful every day I wake up and I'm just like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Life is not to be squandered. I really hope anyone listening to this gets the message, like, go out and live your best life. Like, you're worth it. You're worth it. Do the work. Believe in yourself. This is it. This is all we have. And it's gone like that. And now I'm 41 years old. I feel so young. I've never been hotter. Just, if you're struggling, reach out to someone and don't ever give up, because it really, 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 truly does get better if you just stay in there, play the tape, do the work. Okay, if I have a drink, this is what's going to happen. That route is so predictable. It's so boring because you are living in a hell loop of just the same thing over and over and over again. And the other option is the unknown. And that is where all the magic lies. It's all in the unknown. And it's all just a great surprise. So this is the first HollyWould Confessional solo episode. And I just want to thank you for being on this journey with me. Ta-ta.
I just wanna get effed up and dance.
Thanks for listening to the HollyWould podcast. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Holly M. Solem and at HollyWould.substack.com. HollyWould.substack.com. The HollyWould podcast is filmed in Los Angeles, California, and produced by Cristiana Ladki-Williams. We'll be back next month with a brand new one for you. Please follow, like, download, share, and don't forget to leave a review.
Saying my name, let me tell you, I don't